Hello everyone. Sorry about this small delay. We had some technical issues. Uh, Hopefully everything is fine now. I guess, Mikhail, thank you very much for being with us. I want to let you know that attendees can ask questions on YouTube channel or on the Slack channel for this track. You will not see them live. I will relay them for you at the end of the session. And since we are running a bit late now, I will pass it to you. If you can introduce yourself, please, and start your presentation. Thank you very
Sure,
much.
sure. Thanks for the intro, Samuel. I'm really happy to be speaking at JNation today. It's my first time I'm doing this talk at this conference, and let's kick it in. Today we're going to be speaking about Svelte, and talk is titled Svelte for Practical Developers because it's focusing on basics of Svelte, how you can quickly pick it up, whether you are a beginner JavaScript developer or you are proficient with front end and want to learn some new cool stuff, or you may be coming from other background in IT or not even IT. I will show you that Svelte can be really quick to start. A couple of words about myself. I'm Mikhail. I'm originally from Russia. I'm working for fintech in Amsterdam, ING Bank. I've been also running a Svelte meetup for last 2 years. From the first moment I saw how cool is actually Svelte for all kinds of small tasks, I was really fascinated and happy to share this knowledge with you guys today. What we're going to do today, we're going to look at, let's say, theory part about what is the motivation behind Svelte, how it works under the hood, what it brings to you as a developer. Then we'll go through the typical code patterns, how to do certain typical activities in Svelte code. And then we'll look into more advanced concepts like switching pages in a single page application, routing, or working with application data like stores, and also some advanced features in the end. And if we have time, we'll do a quick demo with live coding. We'll see how it goes. And just one last word of self-promotion. That's the event we are doing together with developers from ING. It's basically focused on modern, simple tools to build efficient web applications in 2021. It's going to be online and it's absolutely free. You can join on Eventbrite to this event, or you can just type simplewebconf.com and find the schedule. We have speakers from Microsoft, Ubisoft, ING, and many more exciting talks. It's going to be 2 days event plus workshops. Okay, then let's dive into Svelte. So the basics. Before explaining what Svelte is, let me give you a quick overview of how the frontend was evolving and why Svelte come into play and is really interesting and efficient choice in today's world. So from starting in early 2000, the web has become more and more important platform for e-commerce and social networking and all that. And that gave rise to first backend centered frameworks like Django and Rails. They're still on stage and they're still great tools for some cases, but the more the pressure was on time to market and quick product growth, the more we had complexity shifting to the front end. And if you've been long enough, you recognize the next logo like jQuery, which was a greatest tool of all ages, I would say, to help front-enders to build code efficiently. And that library is still available and still serves a lot of projects. And what it was great about it was that it provided a common baseline to solve certain tasks. That was great for its time. However, the complexity continued to grow, and code bases of a typical successful front-end project and the team size was increasing, and that gave rise to another generation of front-end tools, well known, like AngularJS, then React, and then even Vue. They all had different, partially different concepts under the hood, but they were all serving the same purpose, that you just learn the API, you learn how this framework does certain stuff, and then you can just keep building, and then other developers who join into the project, they already know how typical tasks are solved, and the framework kind of isolates the complexity of a browser interaction for you, and you just writing framework code, and the framework does the rest for you with efficient rewrites, efficient event communication, and all that. Those are great tools. You probably worked with some of them before. However, what was happening further is that there is more. Sorry, my wash machine just stopped. I will switch it off. That happens. What was happening further? Again, more attention in the front end area, and a lot of newcomers with other IT backgrounds. And at some point, there was a situation when you have to learn so much stuff. You can just name maybe a dozen terms from top of your head, which you need to master before you can actually run your front-end project. Just a simple hello world line will take you npm, JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, everything like click events, preloading, and all that. So what that really shows that the complexity increased enormously, and there was a space for some rethinking of the approach, and that's what Svelte basically did with its first version in 2017. It introduced a new conception, which was let's remove the complexity from the developer code and do the work in the background during the build time. So Svelte basically is a compiler, the same way other industrial programming languages do this, like C++ or Java in some way, right? When you write high-level code, and then the compiler processes it, applying the same approaches like in other languages, with parsing your syntax tree into a low-level code. In this case, both the low-level code is still a JavaScript, but that gives enormous power in applying new concepts to your already written code by adding new compiler features. There is a great talk by Tan-Li Huao about internals of a Svelte compiler. Check this out if you want to know more how Svelte compiler works. So Svelte compiler is written in TypeScript, and it's, again, takes the complexity from you. You will see how the Svelte syntax looks like. It's even simpler than JavaScript, so you'll be amazed. That gives opportunity to reduce the runtime bundle size to negligible 2-3 kilobytes. So all the Svelte app code is just your business logic, nothing else. Compared to other popular tools like Vue or React, you still have to bring some runtime with you. Svelte, in that sense, is much more rigid and almost not bringing any extra bundle size, which again is very important in today's world, where we have diversity in terms of network communication and different browsers on different low-end and high-end devices, and that's where the bundle size and actually the overhead that the framework brings becomes important. So if you try to run let's say complex Vue or React or Angular app on a low-end phone, and low-end phone is not something that is just exists in this presentation. There's like a good 1/3 of humanity is using the phones that are not iPhone 12 or stuff like this. And even you yourself, if you just drive outside the agglomeration and be somewhere in the countryside, you will be on this not very stable connection, and you will clearly feel that pressure of large bundle sizes just are not efficient in those settings. So Svelte tries to eliminate that by removing all the overhead. A couple of words, of course, about the team who created it. Rich Harris on this slide, the guy behind Svelte and several other successful front-end and JavaScript related projects. So Svelte started years ago, and by now it's very quickly growing in popularity amongst senior front-enders and also the newcomers in the area. So today's version is major version is 3.30 something. However, even the second generation, which was released about a year and a half ago, was already a big step forward with a nice developer experience. We will see today, if you are just starting with Svelte, it will be even better developer experience with developer tools, plugins for your IDE, starter projects, and all that. We'll see that in a bit. So let's finally dive into how to write Svelte code. So again, you are as efficient as you know your tools, and for your IDE of choice, there are plugins for either it's a Visual Studio Code or JetBrains products. Make sure you install them if you want to play with Svelte locally and run the project. However, Svelte provides a really nice online sandbox where you can run multi-file project and explore its capabilities. Svelte also has a dev tools that you can use in Chrome, which helps you to debug your code. So be sure to check those tools. And now let's finally dive into how to start the Svelte project. So as you can see, we can just either download the Hello World app from a repository called Svelte JS/template, or you can run the command that is first line in this slide. And this one is basically cloning the repository and removing the Git folder out of it so that you can start playing with the actual file. That's also a nice option if you don't wanna install too much on your machine. Then of course you need to go to that folder and install dependencies, and then there you go, you have a Hello World app. We will look into this quickly, and then finally look at the syntax. So give me a moment. So here we have freshly installed starter project. Let's quickly explore what it has. So it has by default a rollup bundler config. However, Svelte also comes with a Webpack starter. So if you want to use Webpack, you can easily find a template on official GitHub repo. In a starter package, it doesn't have much options. It's just a production build command and a dev build where you can get the hot reloading while you're coding. So you can run npm run dev to get your dev setup running. In the source folder, you will have only one Svelte component. That's how it looks like. It's basically a file with a Svelte extension. And since I have already installed the extension for Svelte, that's why I have also the syntax highlighting. So make sure you have it on your Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ to have all the auto-completion and syntax highlighting. So this component is really, really simple. It just has some HTML, some styles, like almost nothing. And the app is initialized in the main.js file. This one may look a bit familiar to users of React or Vue 2 users, where you creating an instance and just saying where to mount the application. And here it is done via the object which has a target property, where you need to pass the DOM node where the project will be mounted. So that's that. The props object props property is not required, so we can skip it if we want. And of course, the index.html file is placed in the index in the public folder, and here you can see the pretty typical setup if you've been using rollup before. Okay, now let's go back to the syntax and quickly overview what are the building blocks of Svelte component. So Svelte also uses the pretty standard approach today with single file components that combine together HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. The difference is that you do not limit HTML into a separate template tag or something like this. You can just write it anywhere, above, below, in the middle. It will all work because it's a compiler that will parse your component and will extract the script part, the style part, and will make them scoped by default. The styles are scoped by default in Svelte. So here we can see a simple component with one property, and this property is declared in the script part, and it is then displayed in the HTML template part. You can see here Svelte is using a single bracket notation for templating, and if we go further to, if we want to display something more complex, here we can see the first Svelte directives. Directives look like, again, a single bracket expressions that start with a hash. So hash tells the compiler that there are going to be some instruction that is needs to be processed as one of the built-in directives. So for simple conditional rendering, you can use hash if, or if you have multiple items, you can have if else to display different statements. And there is a iteration directive called each, which I think looks pretty familiar if you've been doing any programming recently, then you will find it pretty straightforward. So we just take an array or an object, basically something that is iterable, and then get the single instance, and you can access its internal properties inside of this expression. So this is for iteration. When we go further and we want to combine several components, we do it following way. We import the child component. Here we have a simple setup of a page component and several blog post components in it. We create those two files. We indicate properties by adding export keyword to them. So if you just want to indicate a property that is local to the component, you skip the export word. However, if you want this property to be this variable to be a property in sense of how component-oriented frameworks treat that, you add an export, and that will be taken by a compiler as a statement that you can actually set the title in the parent. So here we've also added a default value. Again, remember how you do the default values in other frameworks. Here it's, I think, as simple as breeze. You just set the value and it will be set up. And if it will be overwritten by the parent, you will get a new value in your HTML. So, and in the parent component, which is here on the left, you can see we are setting up the title property and assigning it to some other constant that is present in the parent component. You can also, for multiple properties, you can do destruction like it would be with some object. So the plain simple, and again, just don't forget to import your component in your parent. Moving on, this is really cool stuff. This, if people see something like this, they say, yeah, it's like jQuery or PHP or what is that? It's actually a valid JavaScript notation. You can Google for label statements, and this is the way you can mark certain statement with kind of a name. Didn't have much attention in the JavaScript community, so Rich took it as an opportunity to reuse it as a special syntax in Svelte. So what it does, it actually creates a truly reactive variable that will be automatically recalculated when the source value is changing. So in this example, we are declaring one variable and creating two more variables that are reactively connected to the first one. So as you can imagine, if you run the handle click function, you will have a increase of the count here, and then automatically this expression will run and this expression will run, and you will get double and quadrupled values. So these reactive declarations make just regular work with strings or arithmetics or even validation, things like this, really a breeze in Svelte, and it's really straightforward what is happening there. There can be more than one dependency in such expression, so you can concatenate parts and do things like this. Events, we are all living in an events-based world in the front end, so let's look how the events are handled. For the events, we have a syntax with on and then double dot and then event name. And after that goes the declaration of the handler. If you forget to declare the handler in the script block, you will get a compiler error that will tell you about it before you actually try to build the code and ship it. So Svelte HTML elements within Svelte components support all the standard HTML events, so all the stuff with a mouse over or drag or scroll, all that stuff works. So I'm just using the simplest one here to give you an idea. And for really simple callbacks, you can have them inline. So again, if you're from a React, know things like this or like anonymous functions. You don't need all that because compiler will do that for you. So the syntax, as you can see, is the simplest possible to invent. And so events will run the code in the callback and do the changes. And also what is nice here, again, you're just declaring a variable and then you do something with this variable, you mutate it. This will be automatically re-rendered in the component. So again, no need for declaring certain type of properties, some reactivity or hooks, things like that. It just is just removed from your mental load. Now, after a quick intro into the basics, let's have a look at the typical, not very useful, of course, but some model component. What we have here, we have two inputs, and then in the template block, we just combining the input of those two fields, like a plus b equals ab, right? Or 2 plus 2 equals 4. This is the component. So let's have a look at the amount of code we have to write to achieve that goal. So starting with React, where we're using a hooks approach and create a state variable for each of the blocks, and then increase them in a callback. To Vue, where we skip the more detailed declaration and just rely on the reactive system of Vue. A bit shorter, but still quite a lot of excessive brackets and variable declarations. And here's the Svelte block where we just have two variables and just bind them to inputs and just output it in the template. So here is the difference in the amount of code. Of course, this is a very simple example, but it gives the idea, right? How much of your developer work can be taken away by the compiler. Now, moving on forward to more advanced stuff. First of all, probably there could be questions about how I'm gonna build more advanced applications with adding some styling. There are several solutions exist in Svelte world for this. The most advanced is Svelte Material UI. However, my personal recommendation would be that kind of, in my opinion, goes against what Svelte is trying to do. Svelte's trying to bring simplicity and straightforwardness. So, and those component libraries is a nice way to keep developing component like you've been doing it with other frameworks. However, Svelte, I think, it really shines when you need quick bootstrap projects. So I personally prefer using CSS only libraries like Bootstrap, for example, just to get the styles, get the nice colors and all that, and not interact completely with all the components list that those libraries bring. However, if you fancy more component libraries against just CSS libraries, then you can give it a try. So there is a certain list of those present, and they are actively developed. Other than that, for things like events, we also have the ways to modify the event. Again, if you're coming from Angular or Vue background, you recognize those kind of things. When you want to eliminate repetitive code in typical situations, you can add modifiers and then basically disable the typical behavior for example, when you're submitting a form, or you want some item to some callback to be run only once, there is a modifier for you that you can employ. CSS, as I said, CSS in Svelte is built inside the style tag, and it by default all the component styles are scoped. So if you look at the compiled code of any Svelte component, you will see Svelte prefix and some hash after that, so that styles do not intersect, and you can name them as generic if you want. You will not have the intersection. However, there is a way to make styles global. We'll look into it in the end of the slides. So if you want just style all the headers with the same styling, you can do it from Svelte. First option would be to just attach it to the external CSS file, right? But secondly, you can also do it inside Svelte component. What is also nice, you can quickly create styled components with like real components with those shortcuts like shown on the left. We create a component with flags for different states of the button, with not even states, but more different types of a button, right? A bigger button or a more color highlighted one. And then Svelte can pick them up and map them to the classes that are described in this component. And then in your where you're using it, you can just state the properties, because those two big and highlighted, they are actually the properties declared. Remember the export keyword, and then it means that when you state this property in the parent component, then value of this property inside of the button component becomes true, and that automatically takes the CSS class and applies it to the button. So this really pretty straightforward way to create advanced components inside your application. Also, you can use CSS variables from JavaScript, and if you fancy preprocessors, by default, Svelte does not have them in this Hello World setup. However, you can attach all of the modern preprocessors quite easily. There's instructions on this in the documentation. It's pretty easy. Moving on. Of course, we want to feed our app with data, and there are several ways to do that. And the simplest and most straightforward one is using the await directive. Again, remember the hash block, which tells to the compiler that there is a built-in directive used. And what it does, it just takes some callback that returns a promise, and then basically until the promise is resolved, you get the loading block. And then when it's resolved successfully, you get the then block template. And if it rejects, basically, you get an error, then you can get a separate block. So it's, again, things that are existing in React, right? And Svelte also gives you quite straightforward way of handling this. If you want to do it more fancy with a way through stores and in Redux, you can also do that. We'll not dive into this during this session, but I'll give you the pointers to what to check in the demo. Also, since we have components, we want to have a life cycle. We are used to using this approach. So Svelte has several, a bit less than other frameworks, but just enough to make the job right. You can start loading on mount. You can clean stuff on destroy, and you have also the tick callback, which is again, if you're from Vue community, you know what it is, right? Like after the next DOM re-render, you can trigger something. So that's called component lifecycle that is present in the Svelte syntax. You can make use of it. Next block, the more advanced about stores and routing. Of course, when your app starts growing, you know that it becomes a nightmare to manage data just inside of each component or move it to a global level. So we front-end community was inventive enough to come up with several great projects, which I'm a happy user of some of them. But we all know that it brings again extra complexity in terms of you need to learn how it works. Then you need to learn how to do it properly, and then the new version comes out with a new way of working, and it's always like a constant race of are we actually writing business logic and implementing features, or we are re-architecting our state management system. So Svelte in this sense comes with the batteries included, and it has so-called stores. It's a very simple concept, and it is shipped together with Svelte by default. Again, since Svelte is a compiler, it will throw away unneeded library code if you are not using them. But if you already grew your component code base to several pages and you want to have some centralized store measurement, you can do it. So Svelte has three types of stores, like readable, writable, and derived. Basically, readable is something that you just cannot change, and you just overseeing whether it's changing and may react on it. Writable is a full-blown read and write solution, and if you want something more advanced, you can go for derived. This is an example of simple readable store that what it does, it just takes some counter and updates its value together with this counter. You can think of it as a it can follow not only the set time, set interval, but some other more, let's say, useful property of your window, like if your app goes offline mode, or if registration time is already gone, or if the let's say user entered some data and then you checking it inside of this readable store, and then throw a flag that app should somehow react on it. So it's a example of a self-contained store value that cannot be changed from outside, but can be read. And the writable stores, as I said, it's a full-blown solution where you it can remind you something like a set state hook, where you initialize it with a default value, and then in other components you can subscribe to changes in this store, or you can change it manually. Again, you can either change it without looking at the previous value, or you can pass it a callback and change it with based on the previous value. What is so this is pretty straightforward, and it does not imply any extra way to architect your state management. However, you can always apply the typical patterns of spreading the work with data across several services that only focus on specific data types in your app. That's all possible. Inside of the components, you can not only change the values of this store, but you can also consume it with a nice shortcut, again, using a $sign here. So you don't need to do something like subscribe and then change the value of some property of the component and then only show this property. You can just tell it like this with a $sign, and then Svelte automatically will be showing the stored value. Next one, the router. As Svelte is a growing project, you can imagine there is dozens of developers who try their efforts to build the best solution for something. And with router, it was particularly interesting. There were several solutions with good good features and maybe some items lacking. So it's hard to advise for one. There is no official router or something like this. My personal choice is a Svelte SPA router, which basically just installs it as an npm package, and you can configure your routes in a object manner like this. And it also comes with a typical components like a link that you can employ. So this one works quite fine for the size of projects I've been doing, and it also uses hash-based navigation. It might have some issues with the SSR rendering, but that's outside of the basic scope, let's say. Other than that, Svelte has more stuff. We will not be able to take a look at it. For example, animation built in, or so-called actions, which are kind of like Angular directives. But just to give you a quick overview of useful tools, there is also a debug directive, which can basically stop the execution when the value is changed. Very helpful for daily routine development. This is the way to make your styles global with a special syntax of .. global, and then putting a selector. Again, look at this CSS, which you normally would not write and which you would not want to have in your production build. However, thanks to the compiler approach, Svelte can take this process and throw back the properly prefixed CSS. So that's not possible in non-compiler setup. And some more fun stuff. Since Svelte is a compile based approach, you kind of, in the runtime, you may not have access to certain elements of the page. So here you can see a special directives that Svelte provides if you want in the runtime, when the app is already running after the build, to kind of hook into what's happening on the page. So for that, you can use special Svelte window tag, which will add this kind of callback, or will read certain property on the window when the app is already running. So there are ways to kind of save some stuff that needs to be only runtime and pass it further through the compiler pipeline. The same goes for the head block, which you can also employ for the same reason, something that is injected into the final page. So there's more than that. It's just an example of typical tasks that you may encounter, and Svelte has an answer for this. So that's quick for the Svelte overview. How we're doing on the questions, or do we have time for the demo?
We still have 10 minutes, including time for Q&A. So if you think you can handle it, that's perfect.
Yeah, maybe I could quickly show the online code sandbox that Svelte provides. That's indeed a really nice toolbox to start exploring. So the website is svelte.dev, and here you have the REPL. That's where the magic happens. Basically, here you can start writing code in a Svelte manner. For example, that. It will automatically compile the result. What is interesting here, you can also see the actual JavaScript output, what Svelte will generate. So, and as you can see, for this simple app, you don't want you are not expecting too much code, and actually you can see it's pretty small amount. Just besides some just declaration of elements, and then variables that will be changing, and some init function. So normally this overhead for smaller apps, that's something that Svelte is really good at. You can also experiment with some extra features here, like supporting legacy solutions, or how it will look in a dev mode. So be sure to check this out. Besides that, of course, as in any toolbox, you can save the code samples, or also the examples section is really cool. Basically shows all the Svelte features one by one in a nice overview. Like for example, here we have a mouse position display just done by in like 5 lines of JavaScript. If we have a look at it, what we're doing, we're again declaring a property. In this case, it's not a plain property, but an object. And then we use the property on a tag to subscribe to a mouse move event. And here we could do again declare a callback that will be doing this changes, right? We could move this code into there, or if it's a simple one, we could just do it in line, as you can see here. So this is be sure to check the demos. There's a lot of them. Also shows animation and all the callback, all the properties that Svelte has in its sleeve. But given the time, I would just jump to the summary. So what I would say, if Svelte is the right choice for your tool, it really depends on your project and your ability or will to make sure and make sure everything works as it should in terms of different browser support and maybe some corner cases. Of course, with the current growth of community, a lot of things were improved and bugs are fixed regularly. However, it's no way near the consumption of a bigger frameworks like React or Vue. So that's something you need to double check before. However, the ecosystem and community size is steadily growing, and for most of the developer cases, there is a solution or a library that should help you to handle it. And again, as I showed earlier in the beginning, there are a set of dev tools and libraries that solve typical problems like routing or component library. So that's all present, and I would definitely recommend to play with it in your pet project first, and then maybe try to sell it to the team, because I've seen several enterprise level projects who used Svelte or played with it for small elements, for example, a login form or some widget that needs to be loading as fast as possible, that does not have too complex code base, and which is kind of standalone, you know, maybe some graphics widget with some diagrams, maybe some separate elements that needs to be just integrated as a separate project. So that's actually was also a motivation of Rich when he was building it. He needed some reusable toolkit to build for the built-in infographic widgets on pages of a popular website. So bringing the whole jQuery or Angular or React was not a right tool for this situation. So that's how he came up with this approach. Also, important part about the audience, again, if you want to just broaden your scope and see how the same tasks can be performed differently, probably with less coding involved, then you definitely check this out. But the second big audience, and I think it's much bigger than actually the front-end developers audience, is our colleagues from other industries, maybe Opser who wants to build some dashboard, or the data analyst who needs some nice input form to actually collect some data and then display it. Those guys and girls, they know what a variable is and what is the iteration. But learning all the front end stuff, I think it's really becomes quite an overhead. So if you have people asking what I should try to play with, point them to Svelte. They will thank you later, I'm pretty sure. And again, it can be a nice transition bridge between just let's say HTML, CSS coding to more JavaScript and dynamic front-end development. So Svelte has enormous potential in conquering the front-end ecosystem. So be sure to check this one out. A couple of words about the resources. There is a big event that happens, I think, once in a while. Last one was just several months ago, called Svelte Summit, and it has a bunch of talks about what's happening in the ecosystem, the toolbox, ambitious projects and stuff like this. Also announcements about where actually the ecosystem is steering, and the core community is present there. So be sure to check the Svelte Summit if you want to know more. So that's most of my slides. I have some more links, but I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. It was very interesting, Mikhail. We have a couple of questions, but I think since we have only 2 minutes left, I will ask you once, and I invite you to join the Slack discussion.
Yeah.
If you go to our website, you have a button on the homepage to join the Slack, the JNation Slack. And if you go to Mondego room, which is this track, you can join the discussion. So one of the questions, maybe this one is easier. What about testing? Is there a good player for Svelte?
Yes, very good question. Actually, I think one of the first talks on the meetup we were doing here at Amsterdam was by a guy who showed how to connect a test framework, the testing library, the one that was relatively recently introduced with Svelte. So you can do simple module testing or unit testing, and also trigger some UI functions. So there are solutions to test your Svelte components, indeed.
Okay, the other one, I don't think we have time for it, but it will be about elaborate a bit on composability and components reuse within Svelte. But this one, I'm guessing it will take longer to answer. So please join the Slack channel and join the discussion there if you can.
Doing it now, and we'll be happy to share the links on the slides and the relevant information there. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for having me, Samuel.
Thank you very much for being with us. See you next time.
See you.
Bye.
Have a good conference. Bye.
Thank you.